Hello, everybody, and welcome into week 2 of my college football pick'em. This is my picks for 10 games of the week as part of ESPN's college football pick'em games. So let's get into it. To recap week 1 real quick, I finished with a 6-4 record. So we had a winning record. I missed my picks on Boston College versus Rutgers, Utah versus Florida. I picked San Diego State to beat Arizona, which was not the case, and then I also picked UTSA to beat Houston. So that was the week 1 picks I missed on. So 6-4 record, winning record. Let's try to improve on that here in week 2. So the first game up on the docket is number 1 Alabama going on the road to take on Texas in Austin. This one is a noon kick on Fox. This is part of the big noon kickoff. It's going to be 11 a.m. Central Time in Austin. It's going to be about 96 degrees, I believe, so it's going to be a very hot one for this one here. This is their first regular season matchup in 100 years. As we know, these two teams met in the 2009, I believe it was, BCS national title game where Alabama defeated Texas. Obviously, Texas fans will remember that one well because that was the game Colt McCoy got hurt in. Taking a look at Alabama, they have one of the best offenses in college football. They are led by reigning Heisman winner Bryce Young at the quarterback position. The Crimson Tide are coming off a week 1 victory over Utah State where they put up 55 points and they allowed 0. On the defensive side of the ball, the Crimson Tide returned 7 starters, including linebacker Will Anderson, who has been earning some Heisman chatter from last season and into this season. Will Anderson is the best linebacker in the country, and he is an absolute stud at that position. Turning our attention now to Texas. Texas has earned a lot of hype coming into the 2022 season, even earning one singular first-place vote in the preseason coaches poll. I don't know what coach would put Texas at number 1. I know it wasn't Sark, but maybe somebody just trying to troll. A lot of the hype for Texas has come due to the arrival of transfer quarterback Quinn Ewers. Last week, in week 1, Texas defeated ULM 52-10, with Ewers putting up a solid performance, although I believe he did have 1 interception, and he got his car towed during the game as well. Texas does have one of the better offenses in the Big 12. They have talent in the running back room with Bijan Robinson back, in the receiving room with Xavier Worthy, and an improved offensive line from last season, although offensive line will be a key point in this game for Texas. If they can't give Ewers in that offense time to spread the ball around, Alabama's pass rush and their front 7 will have a field day on Texas. Looking at the defensive side of the ball for the Longhorns, they do return 7 starters from a unit that struggled last season, and with that struggle, it is expected that they should improve. So we're expecting improvement for the Longhorns this season, but it might be hard to see much improvement in a game where you're going against one of the nation's best offenses. According to ESPN's Football Power Index, Alabama has an 81.8% chance to win this game. And I am going to take Alabama to defeat the Texas Longhorns on the road. It's about a 20-point spread. I couldn't tell you if they're going to cover it or not, but I will take Alabama to win outright, absolutely. And I can't say if they'd cover, but I wouldn't be surprised if they win this one by 3 touchdowns at all. We're going to crumple that one up and move on to our next game, number 23, Wake Forest versus Vanderbilt. This one is also a noon kick and this one can be seen on the SEC network. Now, Wake Forest is coming off a very successful 2021 season. They had just their 2nd ever double-digit win season. This will be Wake Forest's first trip to the SEC since 2013, where they lost to Vanderbilt. Last week, the Demon Deacons defeated VMI 44-10, although they were without their star quarterback, Sam Hartman. Recently, it has been announced that Hartman has been cleared to play medically, which is big news for the Wake Forest faithful. Sam Hartman led the ACC, I believe, last year with 50 touchdowns, 39 through the air, and 11 on the ground. So he was a big part of their offense. He's a big leader for this team. And them getting him back this early in the season was not really expected, but it will be a huge boost. I believe before the news was announced he was coming back, it was like a 6 or 7 point spread, but it has gone up to 13 now. So Hartman has added almost a touchdown to the point spread. Taking a look at Vanderbilt, though, they are off to a 2-0 start for the first time since 2018. The Commodores are also on a 3-game winning streak versus Wake Forest, but they have not played, like I said, since 2013, and that was back during Vanderbilt's time in the James Franklin era. Vanderbilt quarterback Mike Wright has been leading the way for them offensively. They are averaging 52.5 points per game, and I believe this time through 2 weeks last year, the Vanderbilt offense was averaging roughly 13 points per game. So a lot of improvement on the offensive side. Mike Wright is really kind of a dual threat guy. He's a great athlete, but it'll take a lot for Vanderbilt to get back to sort of where they were under Coach Franklin. Even the Derek Mason era, he got them to a few bowl appearances, but Vanderbilt is improving, but it's not going to be an overnight fix for Clark Lee and the staff there. According to ESPN's Football Power Index, Wake Forest has a 62% chance to win this one. Don't be surprised if Vanderbilt covers that spread. I think this is a better Vanderbilt team than maybe we're used to, but I am still going to take Wake Forest to win this one outright. I will take the Demon Deacons to go into Nashville and get the win. Turning the page now, we turn to one of the better games of the weekend, and that is number 24 Tennessee traveling to number 17 Pittsburgh. That is a 3:30 kick on ABC. As we know, these two teams played last year, with Pitt had their wonderful season last year led by Kenny Pickett, and the Panthers went on the road and defeated the Volunteers 41-34, I believe was the score in that one. Taking a look at Tennessee, as we just kind of touched on, they are 0-3 all-time versus Pittsburgh. Tennessee's offense this season, though, they have very high expectations. They are expected to put up absolutely monstrous numbers. They have 8 returning starters from an offense that put up nearly 40 points per game in 2021, and stud quarterback Hendon Hooker could absolutely play his way into the Heisman Trophy conversation. And it helps that they have head coach Josh Heupel at the helm, who is known for his offensive ingenuity and really the way he just puts together these great offenses. So Tennessee, look for them to put up a lot of points. They put up nearly 60 on Ball State in week 1. So this one could really come down to an absolute shootout. Although, let's take a look now at Pittsburgh. They are coming off a nail-biting week 1 victory in the backyard brawl. Quarterback Keaton Slovis, he is experienced, and he did have decent numbers in that first game, throwing for over 300 yards. But they do have a new offensive coordinator, so do not expect the same Pittsburgh offense you saw a season ago. Mark Whipple, who was the OC at Pittsburgh last year, is now at Nebraska. Pittsburgh brings in former offensive coordinator from Boston College. This could change the dynamic of their offense. They could definitely be more run-centered. But don't be surprised if Pitt comes into this one really trying to beat Tennessee to the punch, so to speak, really trying to have a lot of tempo and really spread the ball around. With that being said, defensively, looking at Pittsburgh, they do have quite the challenge in Tennessee's offense, as we just touched on. But Narduzzi is known for fielding a very solid defense, especially in the front 7. Speaking of 7, Pittsburgh's defense has 7 returning starters. This group is expected to provide a challenge, and I think that's what it's going to come down to. How well can Pitt's defense slow down Tennessee's offense? Because Pittsburgh has a decent offense, but nowhere near what they had last year. They lost first-team All-American wide receiver. They lost Kenny Pickett. So there's a little bit of a reset there for Pittsburgh offensively. So I think it come down to how long can Pittsburgh's defense keep this game close before Tennessee potentially runs away with it. According to ESPN's Football Power Index, Tennessee has a 54.1% chance to win. I believe the point spread likes Tennessee by about a touchdown. And I'm going to take the Volunteers to get the win here on the road in Pittsburgh, their first win all time against the Panthers. Taking a look now at our next game, it's Washington State versus number 19 Wisconsin. This one is a 3:30 kick, and it can be seen on Fox. Taking a look at the Cougars to start, they have lost their only prior 2 meetings against the Badgers, and there is a lot of an unknown about this Washington State squad. They only have 10 returning starters on both offense and defense. That's combined, not on each side of the ball. They have a new offensive coordinator and a transfer quarterback who transfers up from the FCS level. They have a head coach who was an interim for the later part of the year last season, but this will be his first full season on the job. Last week, the Cougars were taking on Idaho, where they were 28.5-point favorites, but they only ended up winning by a touchdown. Now, it is expected with a new regime, new quarterback, all this new, fresh blood, so to speak, up, I believe it's Pullman, right? Up at Pullman, Washington. I got to look at that just to make sure I have the right place, because I don't want to be up here looking like a fool. It is Pullman, Washington. with all this newness up in Pullman, it's expected that, they might not blow a lot of teams out. They might have a lot of close margins. But this team has talent. Cameron Ward is a talented FCS quarterback coming from Incarnate World. He was second team All FCS, All American last year. So he's a talented transfer. It might take some time to sort of gel things. Like I said, there's a lot of youth and inexperience with this roster. So there will be sort of some adjustment time here. Wisconsin is returning just 8 starters as well, so there's a little bit of youth there as well, but Wisconsin is much more consistent in their culture. Paul Chryst has been there for several years and has really built up very consistent teams. Wisconsin, one of their strengths is in the trenches, and they once again will field one of the best offensive lines in the country. They also have one of the best running back rooms with Ches Malusi, the Clemson transfer, along with Braylon Allen, who was an honorable mention for All-American last year. The receiving core is shaky, although we don't know how much they will be spreading the ball around. As we've touched on, the offensive line and the running backs is where their strength lies. In 2020, you may recall, Graham Mertz got a lot of hype and attention for how he played in notably that Illinois game. In 2021, Mertz kind of struggled, only throwing 10 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. So we'll see if he can get back on track, so to speak. On defense, though, the Badgers do only return 3 starters, and they lose 8 of their top 10 tacklers from a year ago. So there is a lot of question marks and a lot of holes to fill on the defensive side of the ball for the Badgers. But what Paul Chryst is really known for is fielding a solid defense. And even when the expectations are lower, Wisconsin typically rises above the expectations and plays well, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Now, the ESPN Football Power Index gives Wisconsin a 92.9% chance to win this game. Obviously, playing at Camp Randall Stadium in Madison, Wisconsin is no easy feat. And with Washington State's youth and a new coach, it's going to be a tough challenge. So I have the Badgers defending home field here and getting the win on Wisconsin. Taking a look at the next game on our docket, it's another Houston game in my picks. Number 25, Houston versus Texas Tech. This one can be seen at 4 p.m. on FS1. That's Fox Sports 1. Taking a look at Houston, as we already kind of a little familiar with the Cougars, they lead the series all-time versus Texas Tech with an 18-14 record. However, the Cougars have lost 4 out of the last 5 against the Red Raiders. Houston had a very hard-fought victory in Week 1 against the University of Texas San Antonio. That one went to triple overtime. I remember just continually checking the score on my phone because I went out on a ledge and I picked UTSA to get the win, and they kept fighting back and forth, and I kept seeing the overtimes go up, and UTSA obviously could not get it done, but a very well-fought game for the Roadrunners and a good test for Houston. I'm not sure how many people nationally may have overlooked that game, but UTSA is no slouch, and it really provided Houston with, I think, a good wake-up call, and I think Dana Holgorsen, head coach of the Cougars, would agree with that. So Houston is going to be on the road again, but they have not left the state of Texas. They are traveling to Lubbock for this week. Quarterback Clayton Thune for the Cougars, he played very well on the road in the opener. He led the team in passing yards as well as rushing yards, and he really willed them to victory. I saw his diving score towards the end that sort of sealed the game for the Cougars, and that was absolutely spectacular play from the veteran quarterback. So his veteran presence and his leadership, this will be a big key for them offensively to play well on the road and to really put up a good fight against Texas Tech. Taking a look at Texas Tech now, they are under new management all around. They have a first-year head coach, Joey McGuire. He brings in Zach Kitley as offensive coordinator, and for the people who are not aware, he served as the offensive coordinator on the Western Kentucky staff last season. To put it in perspective, Western Kentucky had Bailey Zapp, I believe was his name. He put up incredible numbers, broke some of Joe Burrow's records. That offense was absolutely steamrolling their competition out in their conference. Donovan Smith for the Red Raiders is going to step in at quarterback. Tyler Shaw is out with an injury. I believe it is a shoulder injury. So there is sort of a quarterback discretion there, sort of something to note. On defense, though, the Red Raiders are improving, but Houston's offense will provide a challenge, especially with a veteran quarterback like Clayton Thune. Looking at the ESPN Football Power Index, it does give Texas Tech a slight lean, 65.6% chance to win this one. It's understandable why. It's Texas Tech's at home. It's a little bit of unknown. These two teams seem fairly evenly matched, especially if you look at the point spread. But I am going to take the Houston Cougars. I picked against them last week, and I'm not going to make that mistake again. Moving on now, it's the Iowa State versus Iowa in-state rivalry. This one is 4 p.m. kickoff on Big Ten Network. Iowa State has a 10-13 record against their in-state rivals versus 1998. This season, the Cyclones are replacing Brock Purdy at quarterback. They are very young and inexperienced quarterback room. I believe coming into the season they had 0 FBS starts. Hunter Deckers is the redshirt freshman quarterback who has stepped into the starting role. In week 1 against Southern Missouri, he threw for 4 touchdowns. So an impressive performance, but definitely will be facing a much tougher defense in Iowa. On the defensive side of the ball, the Cyclones return just 3 starters, but they do have All-American talent in edge rusher Will McDonald, so that could create some problems for Spencer Petras and the Iowa offense. Now, taking a look at Iowa, they have won 6 straight against the Cyclones. And if we look at Iowa's week 1 performance, they put up an absolutely abysmal offensive performance. Their defense actually outscored their offense. They put up 7 points and they didn't score a touchdown. Getting the win 7-3 over South Dakota State, and I know people will say, well, South Dakota State, that's a pretty good FCS school, but if you're in the Big Ten, you should be able to at least score a touchdown on an FCS school. With a veteran quarterback like Spencer Petras, no less, who has played several years here, he should be able to perform better than what we saw in week 1. The expectations for Iowa's offense, while Iowa has never been an offensive power, you've got to be able to do better, and you have to expect them to do better because it's adjustments. There's no preseason in college, first game out, sort of still feeling things out for certain teams. So I expect we'll see Iowa score more than 3 points on offense. So hopefully we can see a little more of a high-scoring game, but I believe the over-under for this one was around 40, and I would not be surprised at all if the under hits, not the over. I would bet the under. Me personally, I'm not putting any money down on it, but I would bet the under in this one. Defensively, looking at Iowa, they are very strong. They held their opponent just to 120 yards for the game, which is very impressive to do no matter who you're playing. They will need to be improved offensively if they're going to have success overall, but their defense and their special teams with their punter Torrey Taylor, they can keep them in games and they can really make things competitive and sort of pick up the slack, so to speak, for their struggling offense at times. The FPI likes Iowa State in this one with a 58.5% chance to win, and I know we can expect some improvement from the Hawkeyes offensively, but I just can't get over what I saw in week 1. I've got to pick the Cyclones to get the win on the road in Kinnick Stadium. Next game on a docket, and it is a big one. Number 20 Kentucky will go down to the Swamp to take on number 12 Florida. This one is a prime time kick, 7 p.m. on ESPN. Maybe not prime time, I think that's technically 8 o'clock, but a night game in the Swamp. Last week, Florida proved why they are known for having one of the best atmospheres, and that was one of the best atmospheres that the Swamp has had in several years. Looking at Kentucky, the road team coming in, they will be stepping into a very hostile environment, especially coming off that win against Utah. Florida went from unranked in the AP poll to number 12. It shows you how much that win really has ignited things. The Wildcats, they did struggle to run the ball in week 1, and that will not be any easier this week. They are without one of the conference's best running backs, Chris Rodriguez Jr. As I mentioned, they struggled to run the ball in week 1 against Miami of Ohio, who is a formidable MAC school, but you should be able to run for more than 50 yards for the entire game. Now, quarterback Will Levis is going to have to shoulder the load with their starting running back out. He is going to be the key to Kentucky's success. If he has time to throw, he was sacked 4 times in week 1. If his offensive line can give him time to make plays, then this will be a more competitive game for Kentucky. If he's getting pressured every time and he's really having to make some difficult plays and difficult throws and shoulder the load. So Levis is the key here. They've got to help him out as much as they can. Levis has earned a lot of preseason hype, especially going into the NFL draft and stuff. He's earned some recognition as a potential top pick in the draft. So Levis has the attributes. He has the traits physically, but he's got to be able to go out and use those tools to make plays, and his offensive line and his other weapons around him have got to help him out here. Florida, looking at them now, they have won their last 8 home games against SEC East foes. In week 1, as we touched on, the Gators earned a ginormous victory against the Utah Utes, really added a lot of energy and attention and really lit a big fire underneath this program nationally. I'm not sure how the folks in Gainesville felt prior to week 1, if they were feeling shaky about the Billy Napier era, but it's off to a major start. And if he can get 2 ranked wins in his first 2 games as Florida Gators head coach, that would be absolutely astounding. And he has another freak athlete at quarterback. Will Levis is very physical, very great athlete at quarterback, very great quarterback at the position. Anthony Richardson is just as good across the field. He showcased in week 1 against a very good Utah defense his dynamic athleticism, and he led his team in rushing yards, and he ran for 3 touchdowns as well. So Anthony Richardson has really got that big body type, hard to bring down, a threat through the air and on the ground. So he will pose a very formidable challenge to Kentucky's defense, particularly in their front 7. Florida is also solid on the defensive side of the ball. They field one of the best secondaries in the country, as well as one of the better linebacking groups in the conference. So look for Florida. Florida, just because they have a first-year head coach, they are not some pushover, and I learned that in week 1. As you know, I picked the Utes, but the Gators came out on top. Looking at the FPI, Florida has a 54.8% chance to win this game. I can see it now. The Swamp's going to be rocking. It's going to be going wild down there. Another ranked team coming in. It's a night game under the lights. They will be singing, won't back down. And I'm going to take the Florida Gators to get the win over the Kentucky Wildcats. I do like Kentucky. I like Will Levis a lot, but I think Florida is going to be too much with that environment, with that crowd, and with that really just energy they're feeling coming off of last week. Transitioning now to the primetime game on ABC, it's number 10 USC versus Stanford. The Trojans have split their last 10 matchups with the Cardinal evenly. This year, USC has an experienced offense that picked up multiple game-changing additions through the transfer portal. We're talking players like quarterback Caleb Williams. Also, in addition to Caleb Williams, there's receiver, I don't want to mess up his name, I believe it's Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison coming in as well as Travis Dye, who spent the last 4 years at Oregon. Mario Williams also transfers in. He was a true freshman at Oklahoma last year, a very highly touted prospect. The interior of USC's offensive line is also very experienced as well. This week 1 against USC took on Rice, USC put up, it was 66 points, which was the most they had scored in a single game since 2008. This will be a big opportunity and a primetime spotlight for Lincoln Riley to really showcase what he is building at USC and really get a lot of eyeballs on this Trojans program. And I think it'll be a huge opportunity for this offense to really show what they're made of, as well as Lincoln Riley to represent this USC brand, who he is trying to revive. Taking a look at the Cardinal now, Stanford is coming off a 41-10 win over Colgate. This will be a very tough challenge for the Cardinal. Stanford is a veteran-led group, and they possess one of the most experienced rosters in the Pac-12. Quarterback Tanner McKee has a lot of potential, and the folks at Stanford really like what he brings to the table. He's looking to take a big step in year 2 here, so Stanford, they're going to have this one at home. They've got a quarterback they like. They've got a guy they can get behind. So they're going to obviously try to play this game schematically, keep the ball away from Lincoln Riley and that offense, really just play low tempo, hold the ball, play the time of possession. But I don't know if that's going to be enough, quite frankly. ESPN's Football Power Index gives USC 74.6% chance to win this one. And I think Stanford will put up a good fight early, but I think over time USC will just wear them down and it'll just get into a shootout. And I will take the Trojans of Southern Cal to win this one over the Stanford Cardinal. Moving into our next game now, it's Arizona State, the Sun Devils, going on the road against number 11 Oklahoma State in Stillwater. This one is a 7:30 p.m. game and can be seen on ESPN2. The Sun Devils are just 1-4 in road openers since 2017. Arizona State has a lot of holes to fill from last year's roster. They return only 7 starters. However, this team did make some notable moves in the transfer portal. They added former Florida quarterback Emory Jones and running back Xavier Valade. On defense, there is expected to be some drop-off from a unit that played very well last season, but I would be surprised if they can put up the same numbers as they did a year ago. Turning now to Oklahoma State, they put up a whopping 58 points in a Week 1 victory over Central Michigan. However, the Cowboys did give up 44 points. They did lose their defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, to Ohio State this offseason, and there is also expected to be a little bit of a drop-off maybe early on in the season, especially. They did make a nice move at defensive coordinator. They added Derek Mason, who was the defensive coordinator at Auburn last year, and he was the head coach at Vanderbilt for several years. On offense, the Cowboys are led by quarterback Spencer Sanders, who was a first-team All-Big 12 honors last year. Sanders will be the driving force behind this team's success in 2022. He's a veteran guy. Mike Gundy usually does a very good job at coaching up his quarterbacks. So I think Sanders should have a big year. He'll do a great job in this offense and continue to just build on the success he had a year ago, which will be really helpful in this game against a maybe lesser skilled than we saw last year Arizona State Sun Devils defense. According to the FPI, Oklahoma State has a 78.9% chance to win, and I will take the Oklahoma State Cowboys to get the win at home in a nice primetime setting over Arizona State. And we turn now to the last game on the docket. This might be one of the best games of the weekend that not a lot of people are frankly talking about. It is number 9 Baylor versus number 21 BYU, and this one is a 10:15 Eastern Time kick, and that one can be seen on ESPN. This will be Baylor's furthest trip west for a regular season game since 2006 when they traveled to Pullman to take on the Washington State Cougars, who we talked about earlier. Baylor head coach Dave Aranda has done a miraculous job in his first 2 years with the Bears. He took this program from a 2-7 record in 2020 to a 12-2 record in 2021 with winning their conference and getting a New Year's Six Bowl victory. Baylor's strength lies in the trenches, and I believe that is what this game will come down to. Baylor has an offensive line that returns all 5 starters from last season with a combined 119 starts between those guys. On the defensive line, this is one of the best defensive lines in the country, and Aranda has claimed it is one of the best that he has been around. Notice my misspelling of been there. That's okay, though. Turning our attention now to BYU, they are coming off a win in week 1, but this will be a tough task for the Cougars. On the defensive side of the ball, BYU does return all 11 starters. The ability of BYU's defensive front to get pressure on Baylor and to get behind their offensive line and jam those run lanes will be pivotal to their success. BYU's offensive line, I think, is really what this comes down to, because BYU's defensive front is very talented, maybe even just as talented as Baylor. It's competitive, at least. But their offensive line, while Baylor has one of the best, BYU has a good offensive line, but I do not believe it's in the same tier as Baylor's. And I think that will be where the difference lies. BYU's offensive line doesn't lack talent, however. They do return 7 of their 8 starting linemen from last year. Turning now to the FPI, Baylor has a 57.6% chance to win this game, and I think it comes down to the trenches. I think Baylor and BYU both have very good offensive and defensive lines, but I think BYU's defensive line doesn't have the strength to get past Baylor's offensive line. I think BYU's offensive line is plenty good, but their BYU is also down some receivers that are not going to play, so BYU is going to be missing some weapons, and they're going to be missing some key guys to their offense, so that is not going to help them out either. I'm going to take the Baylor Bears to get the win on the road. I think this will be a big win for them, and I don't know how many people are going to tune into this one, but with it being in a late night setting, especially out here on the East Coast, it is one that you got to tune into, I think. I think this is one of the best games of the week, truly, and I think it's going to be a lot of physical, smash-mouth football, so if you're into that, this is your game here. I want to thank everybody for watching here this week. I want to give a special thanks to ESPN, Phil Steele's 2022 college football preview, and The Late Kick with Josh Pate for giving me all sorts of information that I need to know and helping me to make informed selections for my picks. So I hope everybody has a great college football weekend and enjoys all the games. And let's hope we get a great record this weekend on these picks. And I hope everybody can tune in for next week's picks for week 3. Thank you, everybody.